Welcome to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference, empowering the good. And we're honored to be here with our good friend, storyteller, author, CJ Kirkland. She's got her book out, Self-Made, about Boley, Oklahoma. We'll talk all about it. But CJ, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jeremy, and it's great to be back with you and be home because City Current is one of my homes. So I'm so thrilled, really.
Absolutely. Well, you have a long history with us, indeed, with City Current. You've authored the River City Rising blog for a long, long time, telling stories and interviewing individuals, doing great things, all positive stories for the Mid-South. So such a big part of our efforts to tell stories, empower the good news. But you have this book, and I definitely want to make sure that we spend our time talking about self-made. And so when you talk about self-made, let's kind of back up because I want to tie these pieces together. Give us a little bit of history and how all this starts to come together.
Okay, so the book it's about a small town in Oklahoma, Boley, Oklahoma, and it is one of the only 13 remaining all-Black towns in the state. There were originally 40. And at one point, it was actually the most thriving and what Booker T. Washington referred to as the most enterprising Black town. And so I never heard of Boley. And the reason I became familiar with it is because Andre, my husband, as you know, he had written a pilot about the town, a Western that won a few awards. And so we would travel to Boley, for research purposes. And I just started learning more and more background information about this place that was such a huge part of the growth of history of Black America that I was shocked that more people, including myself, had never heard of it. And so I went to a fundraiser actually for the Smithsonian Institution, which featured it last year on one of its tours. And I met the mayor of Boley's sister at this fundraiser. And so we were sitting there having a conversation, and I was listening, one of those skills I picked up, with City Current. And I'm listening, and she's telling me all of these great things about the people of the town. And I said, you know what? No one knows this. And the world needs to know more of this. And so that's how this project came about. And it's a joint effort with Project 2020, which is the nonprofit whose sole purpose is to revitalize the town of Boley, the business district, Main Street, which the official name is Pecan Street or Pecan. But I say pecan, but it's, their main street. And so Project 2020 has come in and has said, you know what? We want to rebuild and help, revitalize this place that was once, I'm paraphrasing, but Booker T. Washington, whom we know was one of the greatest intellectuals of the 19th century, said this is the model for every other town in America. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what he would say in his speeches. And I mean, who knows about this town?
Well, what I think is really special is you've got a lot of pictures, but you interview different individuals. And so when you look at the judge, the coffee shop owner, they all have really amazing, powerful stories, overcoming tremendous adversity, moving away to cities like Los Angeles, finding love from the hometown and moving back with their children. And so really powerful storylines, but the way that you kind of tell the story of Boley through the individuals, I think is a really neat twist. And so talk about kind of the collection, if you will, of interviews and stories that go in to make the book.
Sure. So as I was doing my research, I saw that there were books and articles out there about the history of Boley, the founding of it. And so I wanted to focus on the people. After my conversation with the mayor's sister, I reached out to the head of Project 2020, and she didn't hesitate. She said, let's do it. And she chose the 10 people. I said, let's start, with a small number. She chose the 10 participants and their stories. I mean, once I sat down with them, yeah, let's talk a little bit about just a few of the people. There are 10 people, and I don't know how much time we have, but for instance, Maurice Lee III, his family founded the pressure smoker that is used by restaurants all over the world, Applebee's, Outback Steakhouse. Yeah, I mean, this family lived in Boley, founded this smoker. It's all of it. I would never have known this. I would never known. And in addition to that, as I'm talking to Mr. Lee and getting the story about Smoke Aroma, he is also the first African American runner to have run an ultra marathon on every continent. The first and to date, the only. There may have been another, since the interview, but at that time he was the only person. And again, I'd never heard of Boley, hence didn't know the history, right? And so we have Mr. Lee. Boley is also the site of the largest private African American run rodeo, and that is run by Willie Williams and the Williams Ranch. I interviewed his mother, who was a trailblazer in her time, an educator, known, by just about everyone in the area. And you couldn't talk to a person in that area whose classroom had not been passed through by someone that they knew or in their family. And their stories were so rich. Also, one of the founding families, the Spears family, his daughter, Ellington, owns the largest private company in Boley. And her father didn't graduate from high school and built the first structure, built everything himself. And she has taken this small company and turned it, into a corporation. And it's based in Boley.
And I think there's two kind of interesting things just on the stories you were talking about. One is how she thinks about every decision, because you make it a point to say she sits back and she thinks about every decision because it impacts not only the legacy of her family and father, but also all the lives that she's responsible for within, the homes and such that she takes care of. And so I think she understands the gravity of the decisions and the impact it has. And I thought that was a really cool thing to say.
Yes.
And then the other thing is, we were talking about Willie, and, here you have this very prominent figure that's more nationally known. And he's like, you don't need to interview me. You need to interview my mom.
Yes, exactly.
Really cool.
Exactly. And that was one of those real life lessons. I arrived at their home to interview him. I was prepared to interview him. I had done my background, research. And I walk in and his mom, Mrs. Williams, is sitting at the table. And he said, no, you're going to interview her. She is Boley. And that was so powerful to witness in real time, because as much as he's done and as well known as he is, he said, no, I owe the person I am and everything I have to this woman. She is the person that you should be interviewing. And that's what we did. And the stories are so powerful. We have Nate Bradford, who is, just an advocate for ranching and really coming back to we're the farm to table movement. He and his family, they are truly, when you talk about American ranchers, here they are. And he has invested so much and no matter how many setbacks he encounters or losses, he's like, no, we are going to keep this going because this is where we belong, and I mean, just I have no words. I keep pausing, you know, um, because there really just aren't enough words to describe, the strength and resilience and just power in the stories that they shared with me. And they are all from the town of Boley, or their families, moved there at a very young age. And they are all interested. Their goal is seeing Boley become the town that it once was. And they believe it will.
Yeah, I look at it as it's a book to me that's powerful on so many different fronts. One is it raises awareness for Boley, Oklahoma. Two is it raises attention for the power of community, of individuals working together in small towns. And like, there's so many kind of cool threads that I think are just really good takeaways that no matter where you live, you can appreciate the stories and the individuals and what Boley, Oklahoma means to our nation and our world. And I think, to me, that's kind of the larger lens that I view it in. But what do you hope that readers take away from the book?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Is I feel the same way you do, in that these stories can be applied to any person anywhere in the world. You see the underlying themes throughout, of pushing through, not giving up, lifting others up around you. That's something that I've seen you do, throughout our time together, working together. And I do feel that even if you've never heard of this town, um, never heard of the people that are featured in this book, reading their stories, you can apply anything that's written in this book to your own life and to those around you. And so, what I really hope that people take away from this is not just the lessons in it, but in real terms, like what Project 2020 is doing. How do we not only talk about rebuilding communities, what does that look like in tangible ways? And so for me, my heart was in this particular project, this particular time. And for Boley, what does that look like? And Project 2020, it has done things that you can see. There's a park at the entrance of Boley now. It was just empty land. And it is now a beautiful park at the entrance to the town. And that was done through fundraising efforts and people coming together and saying, how can I help? And there are other things that the people of Boley have expressed there's a need for. And so my hope is that whatever profits are generated through people purchasing this book, it's sown back into their community, to do things that they want, not that we as outsiders per se think they want, but that they would like to see in their community. And I think that can be done anywhere. Here in Memphis, that's a question that City Current asks all the time. What do you need from us? What can we do? We aren't telling people what we think they need or ought to have. We're asking them, how can we help you, attain the things and the goals that are dear to you and that are necessary for your growth. And that's just something that I felt drove me through this process, and getting it done. And I really hope that we see some tangible results.
Absolutely.
From the sale of the book.
Well, speaking of the sale, where do we go to get the book? Self-made, Boley, Oklahoma.
Self-made, Boley, Oklahoma. You can visit the website, thetownofboley.org. There's a link for purchase. And so far, that is the only way to purchase the book. Also, if anyone's willing to reach out to me, of course, via email or Instagram, social media, I can definitely direct them to the website. But yes, thetownofboley.org.
What have you learned going through this process? And you and I were talking before we clicked record on this of just, all the things that you learned as a writer, as a storyteller, doing River City Rising that lead you to these opportunities, to be able to share these stories. So what's something that you've learned going through the process of writing this book that has made you a better writer and a stronger person?
I think first and foremost is listening to the person who's speaking and really paying attention to what's important to them. For example, we know about Boley and the rodeo and the bank and Booker T. Washington spoke about Boley on numerous occasions. He was so impressed with the town. And I really wanted the people I was speaking with to share things that we had never heard before. And so I went in with no agenda. I didn't sit down with anyone, and I didn't bring anything up that I already knew about the town because I wanted to see what they would share with me and what they were willing to share with me. And I also feel that, one thing I going back to City Current and what I learned from all of those years with you guys is really honoring the person and honoring those moments, because I do feel in situations such as these where we're telling stories and not just writing news articles, that they want to entrust you, with those things that are closest to their hearts. And the only way I feel people will do that is when they feel and truly believe that you are there for them, not for yourself. And that is something that I continue to learn through this process, and brought with me into it. And it was just even more elevated because, there's some heartbreak in this book. You've read it, and, there were moments where I had to just sit for as long as was necessary in a quiet space. And I did not speak until the person I was sitting with spoke and was ready to continue. It was a very sacred space in that moment that they needed to just reflect on what they had been through, where they had come from, and where they are today. And I couldn't interrupt that, and I've had to learn that, I'm a talker. So I've had to learn that over the years. Just sit, be still, and be quiet and listen, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's powerful advice for anyone who's a storyteller, who's, seeking to tell those stories. And I love how you say, that they're trusting you with their personal story. And so you have a responsibility to be able to do it justice. And I think that is so true. And I would say for any host too, sometimes you feel like you have to fill the air, but in many times, like you're talking about, you just have to sit and listen and let that moment happen. And in a world where we always have to be fast paced and whatever else, it can be tough sometimes to let that moment happen. But that is where the magic really happens. And so I love everything you're doing. I love how you're going about it. It's always been a pleasure and honor to work with you and have you on the team. So wrap up on your end, because you mentioned, obviously where to go to get the book, mention it again, and then where do we go to follow your efforts, because you are on social media, and that way we can, always be in the loop on what's next in the adventures of CJ Kirkland. So where do we go again to get the book, and where do we go to follow you?
Yes. So to purchase Self-Made, please go to www.thetownofboley.org. And please do include the town of, because I think if we go to boley.org, it doesn't exist. It is the town of Boley, all spelled out. And as for me, I'm primarily on Instagram, CJ_Kirkland. That's my handle. And I do try to stay up to date with things, that I'm doing. And we always have something in the works. Andre and I, we have this company now that we're housing all of our projects under individually and collectively, because there are a few things that we're working on together. And everything we work on, we do try to figure out, how do we take this, even though it is in the entertainment industry, and of course we want it to make a profit for whomever we're working with, but also, how do we take that and find a way to give back? And I mean, that's at for me, that's at the root of pretty much everything we agree to do, everything we sign on. We're trying to find a way to sow back into the communities that have given so much to us. Memphis is one of those communities, New York, now Oklahoma, LA. I mean, there's so many places that have embraced us that, it will never end. The option and the need and the ability to give back, it will never end.
Well, I love that you take all of these platforms that you and your husband are creating and use them to power the good. And that's something that, has always been for your heart and Andre's heart. And that's why we love you so much. I mean, you and your amazing family. So absolutely love everything you're doing, and definitely appreciate all you're doing with the book. So once again, Self-Made, Boley, Oklahoma. Make sure everyone check it out, get it, because you will love it. It does show you an appreciation for not only Boley, Oklahoma, but for small town community, sacrifice, service. There's so many amazing, powerful threads. So CJ, thank you for all you do, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for having me.